Hi, and welcome to the Networked Learning Seminar. And in this seminar, we're going to take a look at networked learning and what it means and should you do it. The graphic in the background here, the network teacher graphic, is from a lecturer and online learning thinker and teacher, Alec Couros. And it shows a teacher or an educator at the center of their network. This is both a traditional network and a modern digital network. So you'll see at the top here, behind the network learning banner, he talks about curriculum documents and colleagues and popular media and print and digital sources and family and local community. Video down here, all of which are fairly traditional ways that we would create a network of people to help us learn as educators, to learn our craft, to learn about new ideas, new resources, new practices and things like that. And he's added in other things like microblogging, which will be Twitter, for example, digital photo sharing, social bookmarking, where you bookmark sites and resources that you find online and perhaps add comment or commentary to them and then share them with other people, and social networking services, video conferences, digital forums or foreign online communities. And these are all things that make up the online networked learner and the online networked teacher. And we're going to take a look at a quick look at what they are and how you might use them. And in other seminars in this series, we'll take a closer look at how you might use them. But that's basically what a networked educator is: somebody who uses both traditional and new digital media, forums and opportunities to enhance their own practice as an educator, to enhance their own knowledge about teaching and learning, and to enhance their own knowledge about their particular subject area of interest or expertise. So let's take a quick look at the characteristics of networked learning. It's usually informal, and it's often a form of non-institutional professional development. Basically, this is something that people would usually do themselves and by themselves. They would do it with other people online, but it's a choice that they usually make themselves to engage in professional development that's probably outside of their institution. Network learning assumes we need to engage in self-directed on-the-job learning, and it argues that because of the wealth of information online, good digital literacy strategies are necessary to drive our continued informal and professional development. So, to summarize this, or to talk about it in a slightly different way, network learning is the individual learner deciding which resources, which people, which websites, which forums they're going to make a part of their learning network, and they're going to choose their path through those resources themselves. It's probably not going to be part of an organized course of development. It can be, but it probably won't be. It's probably just how that person engages with their own professional development on a day-to-day basis. And as educators, we're often always reflecting about the things that we do in classrooms, the things that we do in lecture halls, how we grade and mark, how we engage with assessment, how we work with different types of students. We're often thinking about or trying out new techniques and new ideas. And when we do that online, and when we do that with the help of other people, and when we do that by finding resources via other people and other websites and forums, that's essentially networked learning. It's the thing that educators have always done, which is striving to improve themselves and looking wherever they can for resources to do that with. And network learning is how that happens online. So it's in many ways the same ambitions, the same drives, and a lot of the same techniques that are involved in driving your own professional and personal development. But we just talk about them, how they happen online. And that's essentially network learning. Let's take a look at a definition of network learning. Learners have to take responsibility to organize their own learning activities and to acquire knowledge from others to achieve their learning goals. And this is a fairly modern definition. It's from 2013. It's from a paper by Sao, Kester, and Swab. And the reference is on the website if you're looking for it. And so let's take a closer look at this. Taking responsibility to organize your own learning activities. When you're looking for resources online, you're usually the person who chooses where to look for them. And you're usually the person who decides what you want to learn. And you're usually the person who decides the tools that you'll use to gather those ideas, resources. And you're usually the person who assesses your own learning, who decides how you make those resources into useful knowledge for you. So let's take a look at that definition. Learners have to take responsibility to organize their own learning activities. So when you are working online, and let's say that you are trying to develop, alter or change some of your teaching practices, or let's say that you're trying to learn about digital technologies and digital techniques, when you do that online, you're probably the person who makes most of the decisions, unless you're doing it as part of an organized course. You organize your time, you decide on the particular resources and websites and forums that you're going to use. You decide how you're going to engage with those resources. Is it going to be very active? Is it going to be very passive? Would you contribute to the forums and communities, or would you just read them? You're going to make decisions about how you acquire knowledge from others. Are you going to actively go out and try and forge links with other people in terms of building a community, to actively try and get as much information as you can? Or are you going to passively look at other people's posts and ideas? You're going to decide your own learning goals, which is making decisions about the specific things that you want to learn and what you think is useful and potentially represents you achieving what you want to achieve. And you're probably going to be the person who assesses all of those as well. You're going to be assessing how well the tools are working, how well you're learning. You're going to be assessing the content and the ideas that other people give you. And you'll be assessing how well you've achieved the learning goals that you set out. So a big part of network learning is taking responsibility for driving your own learning, for deciding your goals, for deciding the mediums that you're going to use, for deciding how you're going to engage with those mediums and those people, and for deciding how you're going to translate that into knowledge and how you're going to assess and judge that. Here's another definition from Goodyear, Banks and Hodgson and O'Connell. Network learning is learning in which information and communication technology is used to promote connections between one learner and other learners, between learners and tutors, between a learning community and its learning resources. And this definition really focuses on the idea of communication and communication over and using technology. Network learning really focuses on building and creating connections between people and between resources. It's very focused on sharing information and sharing ideas, and it's very focused on feedback. That when somebody shares an idea with you, or when somebody posts something online about their experience or practice, that we pass that on to other people if we're interested in it, that we engage with it ourselves, and that we comment on that person's ideas and practices. It's also very focused on communication to find resources. The more connections that you have in your field with people who are doing the same thing, the more resources that you're going to encounter, and the more reflections on those resources you're going to encounter, and the more people implementing and talking about that you're going to encounter. I guess the difference, a way to think about it might be that in traditional contexts, a lot of teachers would have shared this information and these ideas and these experiences and resources with the people in their staff room over coffee and cups of tea as conversations between classes. And network learning takes that and extends it into an online environment where you're doing the same thing. You're asking people what they do, telling them what you do, and hoping that you can get snippets of ideas, information and resources. and the benefit of their experience. It takes that experience, which is very, very common in staff rooms the world over, and faculty lounges and conferences, and extends it so that it's all happening online, and that instead of having access to the 15 or 20 people that you meet with every day, and the same 15 or 20 people who will talk about the same experiences in the same contexts, that you're doing exactly the same thing, but you have access to potentially thousands or tens of thousands of people, all of whom have similar aims, but all of whom have radically different contexts, resources, and experiences that you can benefit from. And that's essentially network learning. Learning as a process of building connections with people who have information, experience, knowledge, ideas, and comments that you can benefit in your own self-directed learning from. Network learning is probably online. It actually doesn't have to be. As we said, network learning is something that people have been doing for millennia. Anytime that you work in an organization and you learn from people in that organization about the job that you do and about better ways to do it or new ways to do it, and that's network learning. Anytime that you pick up a journal or a magazine or a newspaper that teaches you something about what you're doing, that's network learning. Anytime you watch a program on TV or record something from Open University. But modern network learning is probably going to happen online. It's probably going to focus on using your peers as you do in the staff room and not instructors as you do in a university setting. And it's probably going to happen over social media. And social media here includes things like Facebook and Twitter, which are social network sites. But it also includes things like Flickr, which is a photography sharing site. It includes slide sharing sites where you can post your presentations. Social media is a very broad church. It's basically any medium whereby you can share the things that you think and that you create. Network learning is probably student-driven, and it probably doesn't have a required or set syllabus. If you think about your staff room conversations, your engagement with them is usually driven by what you want to know and who you think can tell it to you. And it's exactly the same in online network learning. Students decide what they want to learn. There's no set or required syllabus. They set their own learning goals and then they go out and try to achieve them. It's possibly collaborative. They're not necessarily so. And collaborative in terms of people deciding to work together on particular projects, and that's very easy to do online. It's very easy for people to make a decision that they'll write a blog together, or they'll develop a learning resource together, or they'll make a series of videos together. But that's not necessarily the case. It can be cooperative as well, whereby you access other people's thoughts, information, and experiences, and you work using them. Maybe you comment on one another's and you engage and you communicate and you talk, but it's not collaborative in the same way as you're building something together. But there's probably a collaborative or cooperative aspect to what you're doing. In network learning, your peers will provide resources, input, and critical engagement. So you will connect with people on Twitter and on blogs and in magazines and in journals and via YouTube, and in the same way that you do in a staff room or in a faculty lounge or in a conference, you'll be looking to those people to feed you with new information, and they'll be looking to you to do the same thing. When you find something interesting and cool, you share it with a community of people that you've created around you, and they do the same thing, and you all rely on that to generate new resources, new idea, and new knowledge. And you also rely on one another for critical engagement, for people responding and giving you feedback on the ideas that you come up with and on the resources that you have and on the things that you try out and talk about. And network learning is hugely dependent on an individual's ability to connect and their proficiency with online tools. In the same way that what you get out of staff room conversations is hugely dependent on your ability to connect with people and your proficiency with the techniques of day-to-day social engagement. Network learning is hugely dependent on an individual's ability to create an online network of people, to connect with people socially online, and it's dependent as well on their proficiency with using the tools for gathering networks together and talking to people. It's dependent on people's proficiency with social media. It's dependent on their proficiency with blogging if they choose that platform to use. It's dependent on their ability to use the tools that are the stock and trade of creating online networks. How it happens. It can be centrally organised and part of a structured course, but it probably isn't. It can also be self-organised, driven by individual needs, capabilities and requirements. Individuals going online and deciding they want to learn something. It may be informal, a spare time activity, something that you do outside of your daily job, or it may be a required part of a course or of professional development. Some courses and professional development courses require you to develop this network of people online with similar interests and require you to start engaging with them as part of your own professional or personal development. And for some people, it's just how they organize their online professional life. Some people have social media presences and they're very comfortable with them. And it's just part and parcel of what they do. They don't think about it necessarily as network learning. They don't think about the theory. They don't even think about the practice. It's just they're socially communicative people. They exist and have profiles online, and that's part of their online professional life. As I said, we've been doing network learning for millennia. The fact that we learn by mimicking one another, that we learn by watching one another, and that we learn by having other people model behavior is a form of network learning. And for many people, they've just carried that over into their online lives naturally and without thinking about it. And I think it's useful, especially if you're new to online learning, to think of it that way, that it's just an extension, in many ways, of traditional techniques for driving your own learning, using a new set of tools. Connectivism is one of the theories. And in the connectivist network, you are responsible almost entirely for your own learning. You find materials and assess them. You build a network of people that you learn from and who give you those materials. You test your own ideas, and that can be part of an everyday online activity or as part of a course. And the connectivist idea centers around collecting and assessing resources online and then deciding to create things from them and then sharing the things that you have created. The creation can be a blog post, it can be a change in your teaching practice, it can be an actual resource that you build, like a new textbook or a series of videos. It can be a graphic, it can be any sort of an online object, or it can just be an idea that you write about. But it's very active and it's very participatory. It involves finding resources online and then doing things with them, making things with them that are adapted and fit to your own needs and your own context. You're a self-driven learner, so you go online with particular things that you want to learn, you find the resources, you think about them, and then you implement them by changing how you teach or by changing a practice, and then you talk about that implementation. And that's essentially connectivism, the theory behind network learning. Here's the connectivist model via Stephen Downes. There are links to him on the website and on the page for this presentation. And he's one of several major connectivist thinkers. And it involves 4 related and overlapping skills. The first skill is collecting your resources. The second skill is reflecting on what you've collected. The third skill is remixing, that creation stage where you write about them, or you make something new for them, or you create an object or a resource or a textbook or whatever it is. And the fourth is where you reflect on what you've created and you share that reflection back into the community for them to begin collecting it as part of their own. Or maybe you share the thing that you've created and not the reflection. So you create a textbook and then you give that to the community for them to use and engage with and think about and talk about as they see fit. And they collect that and they reflect in it and they remix it by using it in their own practices, and then they share their thoughts about it. So we take other people's materials and add value to them by giving them back a reflection or an experience of what they have created. And we in turn take the things that they have created we think about them, we adapt them, and we add value by sharing back. This model uses digital curation. In this presentation, we define digital curation as the selection, collection, and archiving of digital artifacts, and the addition of value through reflection, commentary, and use of what we gather. And that's essentially the four-part model we just talked about. Digital curation is the gathering, the reflection, the repurposing, and the sharing of resources, ideas, and experiences in online contexts. And that's what digital curation is in connectivism. There are other definitions for it. If you're a professional librarian or archivist, your definition is more towards gathering and preserving digital artifacts. But in connectivism, which is a theory of learning, digital curation has to do with selection, collection, archiving, reflection, commentary, and adding value to the things that we gather. Let's take a closer look at the process. Digital curation stage 1 is collecting. And collecting is finding articles, videos, podcasts, journals, blogs, or anything else that might help with your learning goals. A key skill here is knowing where to look, where online you should look for these things, and who to ask as well. If you think that Twitter has somewhere in the region of 500 million tweets every day, and many of those tweets are resources, are links to things that are useful, a key skill is finding the people who already know the things that you want to know and getting them to share them with you. Having a network of people who can direct you to good resources, a personal learning network it's called, helps. So developing, using social media, a community of people who share resources in this way, who share links, who share ideas, and who you can ask for this type of help is hugely helpful in finding this information out. Sorting out good information from bad, being critical, discerning, and rigorous is hugely important as well. There's a massive abundance of information available online, and the ability to tell good from bad is as important, if not more so, online than it is in offline life. The same skills, the same critical literacies, the same judgments and balances and abilities to tell good arguments from bad arguments, to sift evidence, are deployed offline as online. And the more effort you put into developing your network of people and the higher quality links they are, the easier it is to sort out the good from the bad. Collecting is an active, not passive engagement. It's a dialogue between you and the resources. It's not enough just to gather together resources and links. When you sort out the good from the bad, when you are critical, when you're discerning and rigorous about what you choose to read and what you choose to think about and what you choose to reflect on, that's part of the ownership process. That's part of the knowledge building process in connectivism. And the first stage is engaging critically with the things that you find online. And that selection process and that culling process is a key part of the beginning of the reflection. And that's a key part of taking ownership of the knowledge and achieving your learning goals. Reflection is the stage 2 of digital curation. And it involves assessing the things that you've gathered and collected. You can assess them formally or informally, but it's probably a critical assessment. Are the ideas and sources reliable? Is the evidence for them solid? And are they applicable to your learning goals? It's probably a public process, for example, on a blog, so that we can engage others. And this is part of the connecting and sharing aspect. It's very, very good to document this reflection process, because if you have a good personal learning network, they will bring their expertise to bear in your reflection and feed in further ideas, further knowledge, further critical thought and engagement and experience into your knowledge building. And through this critical engagement, our knowledge deepens about the subject that we're trying to learn about. So first we sift and sort the material, and then we reflect in it, thinking about our context, thinking about what we want to learn, thinking about what the resources we've gathered together teach us. We think about the positives, the negatives. Perhaps you go and find more resources because we need to. And hopefully, through sharing those reflections, through writing blog posts about them, for example, creating podcasts, filming YouTube videos and posting them up, we get feedback from other people, and that's part of the reflective process. Remixing or repurposing is digital curation stage 3, and this is more about you actively creating the thing itself. We adapt the resources and reflections that we've made to our own specific contexts and needs. We've already collected and assessed the ideas and the resources and made our critical decisions, and so now we take this knowledge and adapt it to our own purposes. We put what we might think works into practice and we test it, and the test then becomes part of our reflection. We think about it. And this remixing or repurposing can be something like implementing a new practice in terms of our teaching practices. So it may be changing our lecturing or teaching style. It may be using a new technology in a particular way. It may be changing or altering how we engage with assessments and grading. It can be anything like that. It can be us writing an article or a journal paper. It can be us creating a video which is a summary of what we've learned. It could be us doing a lecture or a class on a particular subject or topic. But we take the information and we make something from it. And that something is adapted to our own needs, our own learning goals, and our own contexts. And then finally, we have the situation where we share and feed forward the thing that we've created. And that's part of our building our network. It's part of our engaging with our community of learners. It's part of us feeding back into that community resources for them to curate themselves. The resources or the tests or the reflections and the artifacts that we've created are shared online. It may be the thing itself if we're creating an infographic, if we're creating a graphic or video. It may be our thoughts about the thing itself if it's a change in teaching practice. If it's a journal article, then we publish that online. People pull these resources that we share into their own curation process, and in turn gather them, assess them, reflect on them, remix and repurpose and share them. We get value from their engagement, reflection, remixing and sharing. So we have another voice thinking and talking about the things that we've done and giving us further ways and perspectives to think about it. Our personal learning network grows in influence and expertise reaching quality as a result. So the better information and resources that we share, the better our own personal learning network will become in response. And we have access to more and better resources and interaction, because the better that your sharing is, the more people will follow you, will link to you on social media, and will share with you in turn. There are some criticisms of this. It's a very new theory. Connectivism has only really been around since about 2005. And cognitivist theories and cognitivist science would have things to say about limitations and criticisms and also different ways of engaging with this. Let's take a look at them. One of the things that cognitivism, which is a branch of psychology, focuses on is whether collaboration is a help or a hindrance. Cognitivists argue with some evidence that collaboration is beneficial for learning for complex tasks and damaging for simple tasks. Working on your own is more efficient for things that are simple or where you already know a lot already. Working collaboratively works efficiently for tasks where you have a huge amount to learn or where what is to be learned is complex. And this is because collaboration requires mental resources, meaning you have fewer left to do your actional learning. So the idea here is that you have a limited amount of mental capacity to engage with new learning. And there's a lot of evidence to back that up, that we can only learn a certain amount of new things and retain them at one time. And that the act of collaboration actually drains or takes some of those resources. And that where something is simple and we could learn it quickly, that the cost involved in devoting those resources to collaboration instead of learning actually undermines the speed and efficiency with which we learn. But in situations where learning is complex or where we don't know a huge amount about it, providing that we're good at collaboration, providing that we have good digital literacy, providing that we're good at using the tools and engaging with other people, then it can be beneficial to share the complexity of that task amongst a group of people who are collaborating with one another. As cognitivists say, mental resources are limited, so anything that distracts you can damage learning. This is based on cognitive load theory, and the theory argues that we have a limited ability to take in new information, and anything that distracts us takes from these mental resources and limits learning. In addition, the more you know about a topic, the easier it is to learn and the less structure that you need. The less you know, the more guidance and structure that you need. So there's two ideas here, which is that if you're distracted, and that distraction can be from having to engage with the community, having to collaborate with people, having to find people who have the information that you're looking for, having to assess different individuals to see what levels of information they have, having to work out the best ways to collaborate. All of that has an impact on your ability to learn. And they also say that, and this ties into your digital literacy, your knowledge of digital tools and your knowledge of how to negotiate digital social networks. If you're very comfortable with those, if you know a lot about that topic, it's going to be easier to use them to learn, and you will need less structure. You'll need less guidance. You'll need less help. But if you need to learn about social media while you're trying to learn about the particular topic, then the route of having to learn, or the necessity of having to learn about the tools that you're using, will detract from your ability to use those tools. And to put it simply, if you want to learn something that's complicated online, if you want to engage with a difficult or demanding online topic, and you want to use digital tools to do that, then it's probably a good idea to focus on developing your skill with the tools first, so that you can devote all of your mental resources to learning the topic. Trying to learn both simultaneously is likely to undermine your ability to learn either. This cognitive limit is why it's dangerous to talk on a mobile and drive. Cognitivists argue we can take in some new information, but not much. They say it's about between 4 and 7 new items of information at one time. We can't focus or process any more than that and retain it in a long-term memory. The cognitive limit is why we learn to drive in car parks and not on motorways. New information is harder to take in when you are a novice at something because, frankly, more things are new. It's also why we can drive an autopilot when we drive a route we know, and why we focus hard on a new and challenging route. When we know a topic or skill well, it requires almost zero resources to practice that skill. And if you think about online learning, if we are comfortable with navigating online, if we're comfortable with using tools, if we're comfortable with finding information, then the resources that navigation demands are minimal, and we're going to find it easier to learn new things. We're going to have more resources that we can devote to new things. And this, I suppose, is an argument for developing digital literacy, which is the ability to use online tools well, and the ability to navigate the abundance of information that you find online critically. The more comfortable you are with that, the easier that you'll find your experience of network learning. Sau argues that network learning has specific cognitive demands. Their paper says that if you're unfamiliar with the media used or the online collaborative methods used, the resources you have for actual learning are reduced. You have to learn about the tools and the method before you can learn about the topic. And online collaboration is, for many people, more difficult than collaborating in person. So that also tends to detract from your learning ability unless you're very comfortable with it. The idea here is that in person we look at body language, we can hear the pitch of a voice, we can see the way a person is standing, we can see the look in their face, and we interpret these cues pretty much unconsciously. They don't demand very much from us to interpret. Online, you have to work much harder to detect those nuances, and you have to work much harder to understand the tone of what somebody is saying, to get its texture, to get an understanding of who they are and where they're coming from. And all of those can make the online collaboration more difficult, especially if you're a novice. Freeing up cognitive resources, tools, techniques, and literacies. And this is part of what I'm interested in, is how we can make the process of network learning easier for those who are new to it. Being technically familiar with the tools, social media, curation tools and blogs should help. Having clear techniques for collecting, connecting, reflecting and sharing will also free up resources. So thinking about your workflow, playing around with the tools, having set methods for gathering ideas, for assessing them, for writing about them, for sharing them. And also being clear, ruthless and specific about your topics, learning goals and the projects and associated resources you target will provide focus. In network learning, leaving knowledge and resources at the table are key skills. There's no syllabus or course descriptors, so it's up to individuals to edit their own curriculum on the fly. Online, there will always be more information to read. There will always be more knowledge about a topic. There will always be more ideas, perspectives, resources, papers and articles than any person can handle. And the ability to be clear and specific about your topics, your learning goals and how you achieve them is absolutely key. All that information, all of those connections, all of those social engagements, all of those resources will remain. And sometimes it's very difficult to see the richness of possibility, especially when people are generously giving up their own time and ideas to one another. It's very difficult to leave that on the table and walk away from it. But especially if you're new to social media and if you're new to network learning online, that's a key thing to do. It's key to have focus, to have clear learning goals, to have limited learning goals, and to pursue them to the exclusion of other things. That and familiarity with the tools that you're using will go a very long way to managing your cognitive load and to managing your ability to take in new information and to capitalize on the opportunities that online informal network learning can offer. Building a good personal learning network is key. And a personal learning network is the connections with people, the connections with resources. It's that diagram at the opening of the presentation. It's the people, it's the places, it's the magazines, the journals, the online forums, the communities, the social media, the photo and video sharing sites. All of that is part of your personal learning network. It's the places that you choose to find resources, opinions and perspectives from. The better quality that network is, the less demanding it is to assess information, the easier it is to find good quality resources, and the easier it is to weigh the validity of perspectives, arguments and ideas. Having a good personal learning network gives you a ready-made market of peers to share and assess your work, as well as feeding in resources to your own ongoing curation. And the better quality that personal learning network is, the better quality are going to be the raw material that you work with, the resources, ideas, and perspectives. And that's going to really help in terms of achieving your learning goals quickly, efficiently, and capably. The network learner tends to choose their own path through resources and peers. There are curation tools, and we look at those in another presentation, and techniques are how they sift and sort and deal with information. And they tend to invest a lot of time in developing their PLN because in many ways this is where everything comes from. If we go back to the analogy of a staff room, in a staff room where you have passionate, motivated, knowledgeable educators who are openly and honestly and enthusiastically sharing their experiences and ideas, the quality of resources and the quality of the experience tends to be very high. And it's exactly the same in developing your own PLN. The better quality of the interactions, the higher the quality of the perspectives, the better the resources, the better the experience is going to be. And that happens as a function of developing that PLN, connecting with people, finding that information, and sharing it with other people. Good luck in your digital curation. I'm going to leave you this quote from Dan Pink. In the old days, our challenge was accessing information, and these days our challenge is curating it. We live in a world where the entirety of human knowledge is carried around in our pockets and our backpacks. Accessing information is no longer an issue for the majority of people in the Western world. That's no longer the challenge. The challenge now is making sense of that information, is curating it. And that's key to the network learning experience. I hope this seminar has been useful, and please talk about it if you have a blog. Please talk about your ideas and your experiences. Please join us on Twitter on #Mookie. And yes, thank you very much.